The main question is, if you want to be strategic with your makeup spending, do you already own the Mothership 10 palette in your collection and you are not aware of that? In this video, we will go through a color analysis of the new palette. We will find similar shades in the Pat McGrath range and also not in the Pat McGrath range. And at the end, there will be the final verdict. Do you have already this palette? First of all, from our official website, there's this image with a button, join the waitlist. And from this image, it seems that there won't be any baked shades at all, differently from what I said in the previous video. Also that Astra Lilac Aura, also that one has a metallic pan. So what's the problem with the metallic pan? It's a matter of preferences. In my case, I specifically buy Pat McGrath palettes because of the baked shades. I see fewer reasons to purchase this palette at launch date. So let's start with the color analysis. The first two shades on the left are the Skin Tense Glow, Soft Beige Shimmer, and Extreme Nocturne Brown Taupe Matte. Well, I don't find these shades to be unique at all. The Skin Tense Glow may be quite similar to the Skin Show Nude, and the Brown Taupe Matte can be duped quite well, in my opinion, by Extreme Dusk from Mothership's 6 Midnight Sun. Then we have, in the new Mothership 10 palette, the shades Rosewood Romantique, Rose Sienna Matte, and Bronze Devotion, gleaming golden bronze. So Rosewood Romantique, to me, is quite similar to a shade from the last holiday palette, Celestial Odyssey, and maybe the one in the new palette is a tad browner. So I combine that Saturn Sunset with another shade, another matte shade from the Celestial Odyssey palette, Sunrose Amber, and I layered the two, so Sunrose Amber on top of Saturn Sunset, to have something that is quite similar to the shade in the new palette. For Bronze Devotion, I decided to layer two shades, the Baked Orange shade in Midnight Sun palette, and on top of that, since I wanted to tone it down, I used the bronze from the Mothership 5 palette. At least in the official swatches, this golden bronze leans orange, so I thought it was nice to layer the orange baked shade underneath the traditional shimmery bronze in Bronze Seduction palette, Mothership 5. So until now, there's nothing really eye-catching for me, and actually there's also that Rosewood Romantique, that matte rosy shade that I personally don't like and I wouldn't use. And now the shades become more interesting because there's the Platinum Dusk, Sparkling Metallic Anthracite. So this is actually kind of gunmetal with a golden sheen, and I also needed to layer two shades. I used the Taupe Gray shade in the Decadence palette, Divine Mink, that leans purple, and to neutralize the purple and to give that golden sheen, I used another shade from the Celestial Divinity palette. I layered on top the Bronze Nova shade. Some observation until now. I needed to layer different colors. They seem repeat shade, but if you analyze them carefully, you don't have anything like them in the oldest palette, but you may get closer to the actual shades by layering multiple shades. So if you really like this shade, it may be convenient for you to buy directly the palette. For me, these shades are not my shades, so I'm fine with the layering. It will take longer to get the colors I want, the effect I want, but I don't care. A second observation is that a lot of shades are actually picked from this Celestial Odyssey palette. It is quite recent. Let's go ahead with our color analysis. Next is Plum Cabaret, a neutral plum matte. This is a color that I really dislike, and therefore I don't have a lot of dupes because I tend to remove all the plum shades from my collection. It may be close to the Holiday Quad, Deep Space Divinity. To me, it is close in tone. I don't have that quad. In order to create this version of the plum matte, I started again with the Saturn Sunset from the Celestial Odyssey palette, and on top of that I layered Vermilion Venom from the Mothership 6 Midnight Sun palette. So actually this Midnight Sun palette and the Celestial Odyssey palette are the palettes I'm using the most to dupe the colors. Actually my matte plum shade I think is warmer than the real one, but I totally don't care. I wouldn't use this shade at all. So I have no reason to be color accurate for this shade. And now it's a turn for the special shades that for this palette it seems they won't be baked. I bet they won't. Let's see what happens when the real palette will be reviewed. So the specialty of these shades will be in the multidimensional pigments. Anyway, we start with VR Ecstasy, that is vermilion with blue shift. And this was tricky because it seems the regular blue-brown pigment that is everywhere for the last 10 years. But under certain lighting, there's also a hint of green, teal green glitters. Not sure it will be a standard blue-brown with a reddish base. Anyway, I don't like it because of the reddish base. I don't use those colors. I even declutter my Celestial Divinity palette, so the big palette released for holidays 2020, because it was too reddish. So I expect this pigment to be very red in undertone. To duplicate that, I used a pigment from Viseart, because actually this is quite unique in the Pat McGrath range. Actually, Pat McGrath proposed a blue-brown pigment again in her Deep Space Divinity Quad, but I think this will be more complex. So I used the big Viseart Grand Pro Volume 2 palette, discontinued, and this was an expensive pigment with a lot of shift. I actually added a hint of Cleona Vert because I wanted also a green shift. Next shade is Blitz Venus Sparkling Rose Quartz, and for this one honestly I just swatched Rose Gold 005 from the Bronze Seduction Mothership 5. The actual new shade would be, I think it's lighter and a little bit cooler in tone, but this I think is close enough. Second to last is Astral Gold Lust, described as a sparkling golden champagne. This to me seems a lighter version of that bright yellow gold that screams happiness from the Divine Rose 2 palette. And that's what I used as a base. So I got this gold by layering two golds. First, Gold Lust 001 from Divine Rose 2 palette, and on top of that Pale Gold 002 from Mothership 1 Subliminal palette. And this layering makes the gold a little bit cooler and lighter, and I think this is very close, at least to the official swatches of that gold. Curious that I needed to layer, we have so many golds in the Pat McGrath range, and I had to layer two golds to get close to the new gold. Still a unique gold proposed in a new palette. And finally we have that Astral Lilac Aura, a sparkling platinum lilac, that this may be the shade that will make me purchase this palette if I decide to purchase it in the future. This was quite unique. I have not really identified this shade because from the official swatches that can be misleading. It seems a light pink with a golden sheen, but it also described as a lilac, so there should be a lilac hue or a lilac shift as well that is not actually captured in the swatches. First attempt was layering. a yellow pigment, again from the Viseart Grand Pro 2 palette, with a special shade Astral Ghost Orchid that you can find in Mothership 2 Sublime or Mothership 3 Subversive. So the lilac is given by the blue shimmer from the Viseart shade and the pink shimmer from the Astral Ghost Orchid shade. But I was not satisfied, so I tried again with ColourPop. This actually is close to the edited swatches, but I think it's still missing the lilac hue. I combined two shades in the Super Shock formula. I have them in Wild Nothing palette, but actually one is a Salton from the Wild Nothing palette. The other one comes from the Blush Crush palette, and it may be Pop a Bottle. So all in all, I'm quite satisfied from the dupes I have. I could dupe 90% of the palette within the same Pat McGrath range. So yeah, you have the answer. You may have already this palette. This color analysis has convinced me to skip the palette. I may skip it at all, or I may purchase in the future with a deep discount. For sure, not an immediate purchase for me. I hope that this reasoning was helpful in case you needed to talk yourself out of the palette or to just go deeper and see what I think are the palettes that are the closest to the newest one. And check my previous Pat McGrath video. I have an entire playlist dedicated to this brand because it's one of my favorite brands. See you in that video. Bye!